Hello, friends. Do you want to elevate your cannabis brand or product? Let's get real. Standing out in the cannabis industry isn't a walk in the park. That's where Green Lane Communication comes in. They're not just a cannabis-focused PR firm. They're your partners in getting genuine, valuable coverage, from features in major publications to shoutouts in niche blogs and podcasts. Hey, like this one, Cannabinoid Connect. But Green Lane Communication isn't just about making headlines. They're about building your narrative, crafting messages that speak directly to your audience, and creating robust media strategies that hit the mark. Whether you're just starting out or you're a seasoned player in the cannabis game, they've got the chops to amplify your presence. As we gear up for conference season and head into Q4, there's no better time to boost your brand's trust and credibility. Ready to make waves in the cannabis world? Reach out to Green Lane Communication. Check out their offerings at greenlanecommunication.com or find the link right in our episode description. Let's elevate your cannabis journey together with Green Lane Communication.
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.
All right, we're recording. Krista, welcome back to the podcast. It's great to see you.
Kevin, it's so nice to see you again. What a pleasure.
I know, right? I was trying to think, and I should have looked before, but it's got to be over a year since you've been on. I mean, maybe pushing 2. Could it be?
I think it's close to 2.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Yeah, time is flying. I don't even know. We're already embarking on 2024 in a couple of months. It's wild.
I know. I'm already putting together plans for 2024. So I'm like, 2023 is over. 2024 is where it's at.
That's right. And it's going to be a new year, and we're going to be optimistic for the industry. And I'm excited to have you back on. Obviously, you're very focused on the cannabis retail side. And in our first conversation, I gave you, props on the videos that you were putting out, the education that you were disseminating through LinkedIn. I thought that those videos were very helpful. So I think maybe to kick off the conversation, let's talk about the importance of cannabis retail education and how we can elevate cannabis retail experience through education.
Sure. Yeah. I think funny. I think back sometimes to some of those early videos we did. And at the time I wasn't so succinct, but now I can clearly kind of put it together that it's like growing a retail business, whether you're a cannabis or a traditional retail business, is about attracting new customers, increasing the amount that they spend, or increasing the frequency of purchase. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is all about which lever to pull, when to pull it. If you're a new market, it's about attracting new customers. If you're in a mature market, it's about retaining those customers and increasing the frequency. And I think that those are really retail specific things that apply really nicely to the cannabis space, but are maybe not so much traditional to how we would talk about cannabis retail. And so that for me is like the only areas that I really care about on a day-to-day, and where we're really focused is to say, like, how do we make sure that both retail teams as well as owners have all of the information that will tell them what levers to pull when, and that they can be really focused. And this is not only about making sure that customers get connected with the right product, but get connected with the right product enough that they gain the trust with that retail store to shop again. Because that's really where the big difference between being a high performing store in the short term versus long term, where that shows up.
Right. I mean, building relationships, right? Making sure that trust is in place, in addition to leveraging various data insights to inform your retail strategy and operations. Again, like those levers that you're talking about, right? What would you say the current state of cannabis retail education? Let's start at maybe at the store level.
It's all over the map. I think different teams have different hiring or recruiting strategies, but what as an overarching theme that we have seen is a trend more recently to try and identify people who have really great customer service skills and ability to communicate clearly, and then be able to train in the product education. Super important to have really passionate team members in the store level who understand product and can speak to it. But that also needs to be balanced with having the right amount of connection with the customer and knowing when and how much information to share. And so this is a delicate line that before cannabis, traditional retailers were having to figure out as well, is how do we get a team actioned in store who can share the right information at the right time. So an overarching trend of that more specifically is really now starting to dig into things beyond just product education. So how do we sell it is a big part of the narrative that is showing up today. Or how do we talk about it with a customer? So what's the main difference of that? Well, product education is being able to identify what all of the features of a product are. Being able to sell that product or communicate with that customer is connecting those features with benefits at the time that is right for the customer that's in front of us. And so sales teams now are trying to ensure that they're working with budtenders on how to connect those pieces together, as well as store managers and retail leaders are really trying to think about how do we get our product education or our retail training outside of just PK and into this facet of understanding customer relationships as well.
I'm so glad you brought up, the importance of the staff being educated. I mean, I would imagine a well-informed staff could really enhance the overall customer experience, and even on the sales side, like you mentioned. So that's first and foremost, right? I mean, or I guess one of the top priorities.
Yeah, we talk a lot about budtenders being able to create a great in-store experience. And experience is super important, don't get me wrong. But how does that show up actually is if they have a great experience, it's usually because there's been great trust built there. And that's one of the first indicators of customer loyalty. And if we were to look at markets like California, Colorado, there's been a lot of customer purchasing behavior. We've got enough data to be able to analyze it. Canada is a really good example of this too. So of those retail environments, how many are able to retain those customers and for how long? And so we talk about like lifetime value, but we actually don't have any definition of what lifetime really looks like. So instead, if we zoom in and look at 1 year at a time, we want to better understand how customers are purchasing in that 1 year period and make sure that there's trust built to be able to leverage that in the future with a retailer. So like really dialing in those customer relationships is the first place. And so customer experience is an indicator of it, but it isn't the only thing necessarily that is a positive outcome of having a great trained team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And sorry, the dogs in here were chiming in, so I don't know if you heard that in the background, but
no, I didn't
excited
hear it.
with really,
too.
with great points that are made on this podcast. They tend to respond. So with that, they were jiving with what you're saying. Is there any specific examples that you can share in terms of innovative educational approaches that you've seen in the cannabis retail space?
I mean, I think that there is some interesting technology that's coming up that enables us to better understand how much our budtenders really know about products. So there are apps now that are connecting kind of like kickbacks to budtenders. But I think what that is actually more indicative of really is if we were to look at the big picture is to identify and say, being able to rattle off THC percentage isn't going to be the only thing that's going to be important to getting a product sold. Now, that's where our customers might be today. And I mean, I'm sure lots of the industry would battle about that. But like, for the reality is a lot of our customers are standing here, but how do you open the door to the next set of information that a customer cares about? And how do you make sure that the budtender is able to open that door when that customer is ready? And thinking about how we present information, in what format we present that information, is, I think, probably some of the most innovative stuff that's going on. So getting it off of just kind of like one-on-one or intro training at the very beginning and thinking about training as happening continuously, that it doesn't just like start and stop during the onboarding period, but continues on past into their work life. And that within that work life, we start to measure how somebody is retaining that information, what we can do better to support them. This isn't like about passing an A/B test. This is about being able to identify amongst your budtending team or your store manager team, where do we need some extra attention or extra focus to be able to support them to have the information that they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, that makes total sense. I want to switch gears and talk about a topic that's come up quite a bit on these episodes, especially with Ben Burstein of LeafLink. He talked about price compression trends that we're seeing in various markets, right? So let's talk about navigating the pricing landscape in cannabis retail, the factors that are contributing to pricing compression and the overall industry, and kind of, what implication it has for retailers, consumers, and the broader market.
I haven't listened to that episode yet. So give me the 411 on what he said about pricing compression, because I have some interesting thoughts around what the root cause is.
Well, first off, Ben is a genius when it comes to data. So he throws a lot of information at you. But one trend that has emerged within various episodes when pricing compression comes up, and he touched on it, is the example in California, right? Where the illicit market, right, due to high taxation and just all the hoops and hurdles that these operators are jumping through, it's like it's the competition's out there, right? So it's causing pricing compression, and it's leading to all kinds of different things, but we really haven't focused specifically on retail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's interesting with that is like, basically we're looking at supply chain dynamics and understanding where there is inventory available. And one of the root causes of pricing compression, and some analysis that we looked at with Headset on this was specifically in Canada, because Canada is an interesting place because we have provincial wholesalers who control the price, right? So there's a price floor from the purchasing price at a wholesale dollar value, but not necessarily at the retail level. And what that essentially told us was that pricing compression showed up when there was excess inventory in all of the stores. Now, that would maintain true when we look at states, for example, that have excess inventory flooding into the market. So that could be kind of like legacy space, retail environments, or kind of like online operators potentially, all the way to the kind of more regulated retail environments. Both of those are going to struggle when there is too much inventory within the ecosystem. And when there's too much inventory in the ecosystem, what does somebody have? The only thing that they, as a retailer, that you can have that you can turn into cash quickly is your inventory.
Right.
And so it starts to become like, how do we recoup the cash to be able to invest it in the next thing? That's the difficult part with inventory and with retail, really, is that you go down this path of wanting to ensure that you have the newest, greatest thing for your customer, but you made these decisions around retail where your dollars, your cash flow is held up. And so you need to offload some of that cash or that inventory to recoup cash and reinvest it in kind of like what the new and exciting thing is going to be. So pricing compression is a good reflection of having too much inventory in the ecosystem, as well as having or historically bad purchasing decisions being made. So how do we come out of pricing compression? Essentially is wanting to be really focused on freshness and matching what our customer, I guess, demand really is from a product perspective. If you look at Michigan right now, I'm really interested to see what happens this year after October, because last year there were a ton of outdoor grows. Those outdoor grows flooded the market with sun-grown flower. And so we saw some pricing dynamics happen at kind of like a cheap and cheerful price point that influenced things like ounce pricing. Whereas this year, if you were to look at the data, there weren't as many plants put in the ground. And so because of that, are we going to see the same flooding of the market? We'll see. And I think it's those dynamics of understanding where and how much inventory has gone into the ecosystem and how much of it is aging. Because the customer who is wanting to purchase fresh product isn't going to want to purchase something at discount that's been sitting in store. So a lot of this is also about understanding, and like if you want to fight pricing compression, it's about understanding what are the key decision makers that are driving your customer into the store and what is causing them to purchase in the way that they are. Mm-hmm. And to dig deeper into that data, now I'm just on a rant, but there's like go for it. The average store is really like 25 to 30% of all of the customers that shop there drive like 70% of the revenue in cannabis stores. And so it's understanding them, because we can chase all of the other customers, the 70% who are disparate purchasers, maybe purchasing a little bit here, a little bit there, but understanding them, and then what behaviors do they have that we want to try and get the rest of our customer base to have as well. And so usually we can see better pricing integrity when we see some constrictions around kind of like the race to the bottom with all reducing prices or competing off of price. And so one of the ways that you can do that is compete with newness. And to do that, you have to be able to ensure that you don't have too much aging inventory. So it's a bit of like a tighter constriction around inventory purchasing, as well as from a wholesale dynamics perspective, making sure that we are not flooding the market, whether that be with regulated or legacy products.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what you said, it sounds like an all hands on deck approach from various cross-functional teams, right? I mean, you've got data sets that you need to analyze and structure in a way where you can understand, okay, there's a segment of our customer base that isn't always loyalty shoppers. You know, they kind of come and go, but what are the patterns? What are they buying? And then it kind of, like you said, informs the strategy or the approach of freshness, right? Buying fresh, and positioning the newness of the product that appeals to that segment. And I guess you would kind of emulate that for all the different segments as well, because they all have different purchasing patterns and behaviors, right?
Totally. How a concentrate product ages is so different than a pre-roll, and the pre-roll is so different than an edible, and edible is so different than flower. And the definition of freshness with our customers also looks really different amongst those different categories. And ensuring that we're on the same page about what those look like is really important. And then the other kind of byproduct of that is that as a retailer, it's like our responsibility is to understand those dynamics and then share that information with brands in a way that will better ensure that the right product is ending up in your retail environment. And from a brand perspective, it's your jobs to ensure that you are selling the right amount of quantities to your retail environments that are going to like sell through and not end up as aged inventory. And both of those efforts together can really help this pricing compression and how that shows up in the market.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take it a step further, right? As we're talking, the next, I guess, step in the process would be smart promotion of these new and fresh products. So how does one within the retail space balance discounts and profitability in the cannabis retail area?
If there was one thing that I wish that every retailer knew, it's that not all promotions need to include a discount. If we look at
say it one more time, Krista. Say it one more time.
Say for the people in the back. No,
say for the people in the back.
But it's like if you sit and watch TV, there is an advertisement for any CPG product. Let's call it shampoo or toothpaste. These are the everyday products that our customers use, right? Like, let's think about their customer shopping behavior outside of a cannabis store. They are purchasing and watching and being influenced by promotions that have nothing to do with price. They are not competing off of price. They are competing off of features and benefits and connecting the person with the right thing at the right time and a story to believe that that toothpaste is going to be the right toothpaste for them. And so the first thing would be with promotions, it's to identify and say, not every single promotion needs to have a discount. We can literally come up with a promotional calendar that just highlights different products. It could be new things. It could be things that are really relevant to the time of the year. Okay, we have Black Friday coming up. There are a number of promotions that will happen around kind of like discounts with that. But what do we do to promote full price product just before that? Because you're going to hang out with your in-laws for like a weekend. What things would our customers care about with that instance? Or what things would our customers care about getting closer to the holiday and potentially shopping chocolates? Because that's like a traditional customer behavior that a lot of customers already have outside of shopping in cannabis store. And taking a look at those like macro patterns and then applying them to promotions within the cannabis store is really helpful. The other thing to note is that there's like promotional discounting, and then there's just like straight markdowns. And promotional discounting is about creating a deal or an offer that increases the value of the offer. So buy two, get one, this flower is 20% off this weekend, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Then there's like markdowns, and markdowns should be used to get aging inventory out as quickly as possible.
It's almost like a clearance, it sounds like.
It is. Now, it doesn't have to be like positioned as a clearance.
Yeah, right.
But when you're building your promotional calendar, you need to have a mix of stuff that is being promoted that isn't on discount or markdown. Then you need to have stuff that is being discounted in some way to increase value. And this is a test and iteration piece. And then there should also be the pieces that are kind of like markdowns and really controlled around how much inventory that really looks like and how many offers that is, so that you're not kind of creating an environment where the customer feels like the whole store is like fire sold.
Right. No, I appreciate the breakdown. I really, my brain works when you define things in that way. So that makes a lot of sense. Going back to promotions, is there any insights that you can share, like, that are like effective promotional strategies, like actual campaigns, maybe outside of the macro, trends, like your typical, like buy chocolates for Valentine's Day, but what have you seen that has really worked?
Customers love free things, or like I'll asterisk that and say free things within the regulatory framework that is your state, or your province. So like penny product, for example, customers love free things. If we do the math on free things, sometimes those cost less than a discount. And so let's like break down what that math looks like. If you are a customer and you're purchasing an ounce, and let's call that ounce somewhere between $70 and $100, and you're giving your customer 20% off, you're upwards giving your customer $20. Now, that is essentially you just giving $20 back to your customer on the high side, right? Now, a pre-roll, for example, the cost of goods on a pre-roll is going to be less than $20, but you might retail it for somewhere between, call it, depending on the pre-roll, I guess, anywhere between probably $5 to $20. The perception of value of that pre-roll is likely much higher than the $20 discount. And so the ounce,
because they're getting something, is that what you mean? Because they're getting something out of it, not just $20 back.
It's like added value. Like the customer wanted to buy an ounce already, and so let them buy the ounce. But let them buy the ounce and then get something for free that maybe is going to open up their purchasing behavior in a different way. It could be that they're testing a different strain than what they usually purchase. It could be that they're testing a different format than what they would usually purchase. But these like value add moments, customers love free things.
That's true.
And this is about looking at the math of this too. Oftentimes those free things, you can negotiate with the vendor to potentially drive down the COGS on the product, and overall it is beneficial for everybody involved. And so let's just be more strategic with how we leverage promotions, or what they are, and how we're positioning them. Because in the instance that I'm talking about, you can control how many free things you give away. You cannot control necessarily if you just say 20% off of this flower on Friday. You can't control how much that's going to be used. You can't control what products it's used on. So this is about also putting you as a retailer, or even as a brand, back in the place of control, and being able to do what's best for the business ultimately, which if you're good being best for the business, you will eventually be able to also do what's best for the customer as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot to think about. It's when you really get down to the science of consumer behavior and purchasing trends and patterns. I mean, there's so much that you can dice up and really work with, right, by incorporating these types of best practices and strategies. And it's obviously something that Vetrina Group does, right? And so I want to get your thoughts on, did I say that right?
You did.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was like, all right, make sure. But tell me, like, some behind the scenes at Vetrina Group, like, what are specific case studies or success stories where y'all have made a significant impact, and what are you focused on currently as we round out Q4?
So one of the things that we like to do the most at Vetrina is to work with multi-door operators who have a lot of pieces going on, but are not maybe sure are they all moving in the right direction. So all of our services all go back to attracting, retaining, and building the spend of your customer. And so that shows up in either areas of like inventory analysis and better understanding what product is being sold when and how, and do we have the right pricing situated in store? Do we have the right blended margin strategy? Do we have the right number of products? All that kind of like deep analysis to be able to make out inventory call outs. Then we like to also work on things like promotional calendars and loyalty programs. And at the end of the day, those are really effective marketing tools that are much less expensive than going after paid advertising or things like showing up, paying to show up on some kind of like digital marketplace. And so we're really focused on putting the resources, tools back into the hands of a retailer and saying, hey, like, how can we be a little scrappy here and work with what we have to be able to create and continue to create really great results. We're super focused on profitability. What that specifically looks like is like literally building promotional plans. So taking a look at 1 year's time and saying, what is our KPIs and goals for this quarter? How does that translate all the way down to a 4-week sprint around the seasonalness of something that's going on? And then dial it all the way down into like, what are the actual promotions that we're driving in store? When are we driving them? How are they being communicated? And then how are we measuring if they were successful or not? And that's the big piece that maybe we've got some early parts of organization around promotions going on, but the understanding if they were successful and where to duplicate, what not to duplicate has been a big part of like the deeper data analysis that we like to pull in. So behind the scenes, we're nerds, but we're nerds just trying to help retailers be able to connect with their customers better and get the right product into the right customers' hands.
Right. Well, speaking of nerds, nerds usually geek out on emerging trends and technology innovations, right? And so,
Yeah.
as we wrap up, I think it's relevant to close, and I'm sure you've been asked this before, but the future of cannabis retail, right?
Yeah.
Um, as we envision this next wave of cannabis innovation within the retail space, what are some, trends or innovations that you think will shape the overall space?
There is a bit of a trend right now. And for me, it started to show up in places like pre rolls and infused joints, but going to off sizes. So going to something that isn't like the traditional package size, meaning like that we're not just presenting 3 pre rolls in a 1 gram format. And why this is really interesting is because it starts to be able to position product differently. So basically, what we're doing is saying, hey, we're not going to put everything packaged the exact same way because it's going to help us to differentiate and hold the idea or the presence of the customer or the bud tender in a way that maybe hasn't been so far. So if you were to look back historically in the data, when we kind of like first legalized in California, Colorado, there were lots of different package options and sizes. If we look to a state that's doing maybe like deli style, how that product is being sold in what quantities starts to tell us maybe there's opportunities to package things in like outside of an eighth or an ounce, because the majority of the products that are being packaged are showing up in those ways in flower. But like, is there an in between where the customer wants like a little more than an eighth and maybe not quite as much as an ounce? And like, how does that happen? I also am really, really excited about the way that we're kind of going down. And this is more kind of like East Coast than West Coast, because you can kind of watch things happen. And so maybe like strain innovation on West Coast was already is already it, or is already a thing. It's been very well known here, but from a customer being picked up and understanding strain differentiation, that's now part of the narrative that I'm really excited about, more so on the East Coast, specifically in markets like Massachusetts and Michigan. So I think that's cool, even though that doesn't really like acknowledge that that's already been in market, but in a weird way, it's watching history happen in front of us. Right. And then from a just like straight retail innovations piece, closing the gap on what the customer journey is probably the coolest next step of things, as well as services and apps from a technology perspective that we will see. So being able to identify, how did we capture that customer's attention online? They Googled it. Okay, great. We showed up maybe because of my Google My Business or SEO. And then how do they purchase with us? What's the literal path of them purchasing? How do we measure that? Where do they go on their website? What information have they been influenced by prior to coming into store? And we've been getting there, but I think we've seen this trend of a reduction in iframe menus really, really quickly. Like in the grand scheme of things, it's happened very fast. And so
what does that mean?
The iframe menu is being able to get the menu outside and actually positioned differently on the back end from a website perspective. So when it sits in an iframe, it like sits in its own technology block almost on a website. And it's very difficult for Google, for example, or the Google bots to read it. When we get it off of an iframe menu, then the Google bots can read it. So for the most part, we haven't really optimized these businesses across Canada and the US for SEO, but that's happening all of a sudden very, very quickly.
I'm so glad you made that distinct, or you explored more of that, because as you were talking, I'm thinking, well, everything that she's talking about exists. Like, but what you're saying is there's constraints within the industry due to that iframe box, and is it because Google like sees the industry? Like, I mean, it's obviously not federally legal in the country. So they put restrictions in that way for online stores, or like what?
This is just like a tech infrastructure thing. This is just a byproduct of the way that tech was built originally, I'm sure, to get it to market as quickly as possible, specifically because these things, a lot of them were built during the pandemic, and we needed to facilitate online purchasing. And now we need to be competitive on our online presence with purchasing. And so the tech that I'm talking about is like basic e-commerce based tech from like 10 years ago. It's not super innovative stuff, but it's innovative for this industry to be seeing it offered at scale, because you're right. There are still so many providers that might offer like the best tech when it comes to digital e-commerce, but they don't service the cannabis industry yet. And so, or at all. And so, because of that, like I'm excited about some of the more traditional e-com based technology that's being applied to cannabis.
Absolutely. And I mean, once that happens, there's, they say that term, there's levels to this, right? I mean, that's where there's really going to be a separation between the operators and the businesses that, one, have the budget and the expertise, right? But two, like the right people in place. I mean, there's so many factors, but man, this could really be a differentiator for a business, incorporating that in their overall business plan.
Totally. And like, if you just think about the complexity of that, all of a sudden you need to have creative that goes on these websites and it to be maintained and updated. And that product education piece, or the like product education information that's on the website, becomes as valuable as what our bud tenders are talking about. And so if it's SEO friendly, then all of a sudden we need to really revisit our product descriptions. And there is other tech out there that people are utilizing to make this happen efficiently and quickly, like with AI. But this is happening really fast when we think about the amount of time that these e-commerce businesses have been live and how quickly kind of like cannabis e-commerce is changing. And there's still only like a portion of sales happen through websites. I mean, payments is a huge user experience issue when it comes to online purchasing. But what we do have to be more aware of is that like customers are going to your website and reviewing your website before they're coming to the store. And it's like a validation to come to the store or not. Yep. And so there is understanding how the product needs to show up from a SEO perspective. There's understanding how it needs to show up from a UX perspective. And there's also understanding in what information to share with the customer so that they have the information and confidence maybe to go into the store and ask for the right things at the right time because they feel like they already know something. Like they're already educated, they get it.
Well, and I can see you're chomping at the bit. You're just ready for the floodgates to open at that moment.
I'm here for it. No, it's really just like making the shopping experience better for customers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just levels everything up like we talked about. And it really is the standard, right, within other industries when it comes, like you said, to traditional e-commerce. And it will really start to enhance the overall brand of certain the branding of certain products or the message, because right now everyone's on a level playing field, and a lot of operators or businesses are doing kind of the same thing when it comes to their marketing strategy or their communication strategy, the way in which they're positioning their products. So it's a good thing overall, and it's exciting that Krista, you're going to be right in the middle of it, given all your expertise and experience throughout the years in this space. So I appreciate you coming on. And is there anything that you want to leave the audience with before we go?
I would be amiss if I didn't say, and I'm going to like self-promote for a minute here.
Do it. Yeah.
My team would be pissed if I didn't mention that we post all the time on LinkedIn, like a lot of the tips and tricks that we've talked about so far today. And we just are trying to make sure that there's actionable information, accessible, in a format that is easy to digest, whether that be a store manager or upwards to like a head of a department. And so, follow us on LinkedIn. We share tons of useful tips and tricks along the way. And in that information, hopefully there's some good tidbits that help drive some more profitability and connect customers with the right products.
I second that. Like I mentioned, I love the videos, and I mean, I see cannabis retail from afar, right? I mean, I talk about it as a topic that comes up on this podcast. It's very interesting, but to get the detailed insights and best practices and trends that you guys share on LinkedIn, it's super valuable. So definitely follow Vetrina Group on LinkedIn. Krista, follow her as well. And what's your website so that people can
VetrinaGroup.com.
VetrinaGroup.com. Perfect. Well, Krista, this was fun. We're going to have to get you on again. Let's not wait 2 years this time, though. Maybe a couple months or half a year.
A regular check-in.
Yeah, regular check-in. Let us know what's going on in the cannabis retail world.
Okay, cool. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Of course, yes. And thank you all for listening. Bye.
Cannabinoid Connect, the nation's most diverse cannabis-related podcast.